Okay, so you're looking to move to Orlando, Florida, and you're like, look, Cameron, I don't know if I want to spend the money to live so close to the center of Orlando, or even like around Disney World, because if the prices have just gone up too much, I don't want to pay that. I don't care whether you're renting, buying. You're like, where around Orlando could I possibly live? Well, in this video, I'm going to take you on a map tour of all the areas around Orlando that you can consider when making the move out here. Or maybe you live in Orlando and you're like, where could I live that's cheaper, but maybe still in a decent area? Well, I'm going to cover everything that's around Orlando, show you the map, show you where it's located, and give you like my thoughts as I first came here and went through this same journey. Let's get it. What's up, everyone? My name is Cameron Hans. On this channel, I talk about moving to and living in Orlando, Florida. I drop videos every single week, and I absolutely love it. But what I love also even more is after going through this journey, being a licensed real estate agent in Orlando and Florida is helping with your real estate decisions when moving to or living in Orlando. So if that's you, you need to know if maybe you should make the move, or you need insight on a decision you're about to make. This number down below is how you can get a hold of me. Call, text, email, doesn't matter. Days, nights, weekends, I'm here for you. I can pick up the phone, give me a call. I love it. I do this for a living, and literally I couldn't imagine doing anything else. So getting into it, living around Orlando. Look, if you're like me, when we first came out here in a discovery trip, we started looking around the area. We're like, well, where could I live? Where could we live? Whatever. We started looking at the prices. We're like, oh, man, like, I don't know if we want to spend that much per month and we could afford this. We can't afford this area. Man, this is a nice area, but like, oh man, like, I don't know if we want to spend that much per month. Like, and like when you come here not knowing the area, you're like, oh my God, I don't even know where to live. Like, if I don't want to live in Orlando, like Orange County, like where could I go around Orlando to where I'm still kind of in a good area, depending on where my job is and all that? Well, about to take you to the map here in a second, but it's a complicated process, and it really comes down to, where you're working, where you have to travel. Do you have kids? Are you trying to get land, or are you just trying to get away from people a little bit? Well, it's a lot that goes into that, but let's go to the map right now. All right, here we have the great state of Florida and Orlando. So people, man, a lot of times, like, a lot of people will comment on my videos, or they'll reach out to me and they'll be like, look, like, where can I live around Orlando? Or maybe they don't come from that standpoint, but they're like, oh, I'm looking for this price point, or like, rates are going up. Like, I only want to spend this much per month. And like, the big thing, give me a call, text, reach out. Like, seriously, like, don't just stop shooting in the dark. I know you love watching my videos, but like, literally give me a call, because like, everyone's situation is different. Every situation is different. And a lot of times, just by having that conversation, I can help pinpoint like top areas that you should consider when moving out here, see if they're a fit, and just help narrow down your search, or just help you get to where you need to be faster. Because if you know you want to move, you need to move, especially in this crazy world and situation that we're living in. Like, I'm sure you got some stress on yourself. Like, reach out, let me help you figure out what would be good, some pros, cons, and we can have that dialed in conversation with me and the team, and we can help assist you even better. But so going into it, so I will travel. So initially, when we were looking at Orlando, right? Like, you look at, okay, here's Orlando, here's the map. Like, all right, where could I live? What could I do? I don't know. Like, and like, your first thought is, you're just like, oh my gosh. Like, when you search an area and you go to pull it up, and then like, you're like, oh yeah, Orlando, Florida, that's where I want to live. And then you all of a sudden you pull up the city and you're like, oh geez, I don't even know where to start. And you're like, this area looks good. There's the airport. Like, look, that's not suiting up. And you start to realize really quick, right? When you look at like the Dr. Phillips, the Windermere, the Winter Garden, like, you can still find good prices in these areas. And yes, people reach out all the time and they're like, I want to go here. I get it. Dr. Phillips, one of the highest price points for sure. For like, I'd say like their standard people, your average American that's moving out here, maybe you're not American, but you know what I mean? Like, you're the average person, you're moving out here. Like, you look at Dr. Phillips and you're like, oh man, their top neighborhood was also one of the more expensive ones. So, I think that's how everyone starts. It's like, first you got to figure out what your budget wants to be. Like, I don't care if like you're buying or renting, obviously primarily a buyer here, and you reach out, you're like, where I want to buy, and you start looking at prices first. I think that's like the greatest thing you can do, is start looking at how much it costs to live in each area. Like, could you, and you look at like, okay, what's the cheapest? What's the most expensive? Do I think I could afford that? And start figuring out that area, so that we understand, like, okay, like, yes, I can get 350 in Winter Garden. Oh my, like that's that's the house size that I can get there. Like I kind of want something else, or maybe you want a pool, and you're like, man, anything in my budget for like this area like doesn't have a pool. Like what the heck? Or Kissimmee, you're like, oh man, like do I really need this? And I'm like, I can't find anything in my budget. Okay, that's the first step. You got to figure out what you can afford. And then most people, I think a lot of people, because they went away from California, New York, Chicago, they're like, I need to go to freedom. Okay, well, you're coming to Orlando. Like a big thing is figuring out, if you can't afford the central area, start working yourself back, right? Because like any city, once you start to get away from the city, a lot of times, not always, it starts to get cheaper. Now, obviously, when you get away from the city, you can also find homes that have more land. Now, does that mean it'll be more expensive? Good chance it will, but not always. Now, one thing is a lot of people, they look at like St. Cloud, right, here in the South, and they're like, okay, that's starting to get away from Orlando. And yes, like, you can still find homes for $350, maybe even less, maybe more. It all depends on what you're looking for and the size of the home, how many beds, baths, do you want a pool? Great community, but at the same time, like it's also not one of the cheapest when you start to get away from Orlando. Now, a lot of times, I will mention people, like depending on what you're looking for, like North Orlando can be a great option. The downfall is you're on the other side of Orlando. So if you're wanting to go to Tampa or you want to go to Disney World, guess what? You're just adding all this craziness just to get down to the 4 and head to Tampa, or where Disney World is, or all the theme parks. Now you have to go through all of this city to get there. Huge downfall. Now the plus side is like there are a lot of great schools up here, a lot of great communities, hospitals. Like it's its own thing, and sometimes you can find better pricing on homes. Horizon West over, is a big thing as well. That's starting to expand, but again, it's still getting up there for a lot of people. So if you're like, look, I need to get away from Orlando a little bit, I think looking at North Orlando is a solid option. To be honest with you, we chose obviously to head into Polk County, which is, heading in this direction. And we wanted to head that way on the 4 because we didn't know better. Now the plus side, that area is expanding. Personally, I bet you another 10 years between Orlando and Tampa, it's just going to be full. Like it has to give. The cities get bigger and bigger and bigger as people move here. They have to go in between, and that's where the path of progress is. And if you know anything about, let's say you move here, but like, I don't know if I want to stay in the area forever. Well, that's usually a place to go. You can still find cheaper homes in this middle of the area. But before I move back to that, again, North Orlando, a lot of great schools, a lot of great communities. I do love the area. So to be honest with you, looking forward in the future, we may end up here at some point. I think a lot of times when people come out here, they overlook it. But again, like if you really want to go to the theme parks, like you are adding a lot of chaos trying to drive there. And if that's not something you look forward to, or maybe you're like, look, I don't care less about the theme parks, I kind of just want to get away from people, I think heading north of Orlando could be a solid option. It could be a really good thing, and it's worth looking into. And especially when you have like Zellwood, Lake Mary, Oviedo, all can be great options. Now, like I said, any city, and as you get north towns, like they're going to have the good areas, the bad areas. You have to go there and see them for yourself, or reach out to me and the team, and we can have that talk with you to kind of narrow down some areas, like just your needs, right? Like, our homes in this area typically have this, they don't have this. Hey, this is the price point you're going to expect here. Is this fit your needs? Does it not fit your needs? Is what you would spend monthly, and all of that stuff. But, it's something to consider. But at the same time, a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to go north. And a lot of times, I will say the 4, it's chaos. Like they need to put a, what would you call it? Like an express lane. Like it's anyway, there needs to be a faster lane on the 4. They need to expand it. And I don't know if I really see any plans with that coming soon, but I'm sure down the road it will eventually happen. Now, another thing that people look at as well is Lakeland. Now, Lakeland's closer to Tampa a little bit, and it always has a bad rep. Like when you look at the statistics, yes, like, the crime is generally higher. It's in Polk County. Polk County, like in between Orlando and Tampa, was generally like just a worse crime area. But as expansion happens and people move more and more into new communities in this area, like Polk County it's getting better. Like even like my partner that you'll be meeting here on the channel, like even when he said went to Lakeland, he's like, it's nothing compared to when I moved here 20 years ago. I'm like, I know, because they're putting a lot of effort into it, and they're trying to expand it and make it a better place. And it's a really good option for a lot of people. And at the same time though, remember, going to be good areas, there's going to be bad areas. Now, I will say a lot of people, they start to look like toward Winter Haven, they start to look at Lake Alfred, which is in this area, and they start to head south, Lake Wales. But I'll tell you, so when we drove to Lake Wales, when we came here. The one thing I didn't like is it just feels so out there. I like it, but at the same time, like, it's just, you hit a point where you start to get away from the 4 and head south, and it becomes more and more just very rural. Now, maybe that's your thing. Totally understand that. I think we'll transition to that point eventually, but you know, it's one of those things where realize that the farther you get away from main highways, the more rural it's going to get, which means the price point is going to drop and go down. But again, where are you working? Look up the schools, look up that information. Like, you need to make sure you look into every possible option to make sure if it even fits your needs. Like, sure, it might hit your price point and not being surrounded by people, but at the same time, it might be a terrible drive. So like I said, everyone, like, if you come out here to check out the area, look at these cities, set a waypoint, and just drive. Pick the worst time of day to drive, or a time that you think you would be driving, and just go, because you got to see how the worst traffic is going to be so you know what to prepare for when heading down to those areas. But you know, overall, like, you know, people look at Orlando, they want to live in Dr. Phillips, the Windermere, the Kissimmee, you know, the St. Cloud, and they want to get all up in these cities, and they're great, they're awesome. But I understand, not ignorant to the fact that sometimes you might not be able to afford these cities anymore. I mean, it's just appreciated so much. It's not really the safe haven for a lot of people that it used to be in cost. And as that happens, people will start to look elsewhere. North Orlando, great option. But if you want to be close to the parks, it gets kind of bad. And sure, like, you look through Lakeland to Haines City, like, all these areas they're starting to get better. You're starting to see more infrastructure, more tax revenue as people move here. And I'm sure over time it will just continue to get better. That's the one thing we all can hope. But at the same time, you know, if you're like, well, I need cheaper than that, hey, you're going to head south, but that traffic is going to be miserable, especially if you need to live in Orlando for your work, right? So again, a lot of options, a lot of things that come into it. Or like, do you want to be near a lake? Do you not care? I mean, there's lakes everywhere, so you're probably going to be near one anyways. But you know, there's a lot of things that go into it. And like, living around Orlando, like, you're still like, people is like, oh, it's so expensive. Like, okay, yes. Everywhere is way more expensive. It's the whole country. It's not just Florida. And I'm like, you'd be paying, you know, like $750,000 for an average house in like San Diego County right now. Like, come on, get out of here. Like, it's still, in retrospect, it's still a lot better than a lot of areas. Unfortunately, though, obviously income does dictate that. So I get it. But, you know, the biggest thing is, like, realize that, like, when you do get away from these major neighborhoods, these major areas, like, that drive is really what's going to kill you. And to be honest with you, even since we may move out here, like, it's just, the traffic gets worse and worse and worse. And it's just, man, like, you just pray that the infrastructure gets updated eventually, but it becomes a more important part. If you're coming from a major city already, like Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, New York City, Chicago, Atlanta, you're probably already going through crazy traffic time anyways, so you're probably already used to it, and it's probably honestly nothing. But even the worst traffic here is still nothing compared to like Los Angeles during rush hour. That I said what I said. But you know, along the 4 is where the expansions happen. So this is where you'll find, like, especially in Davenport, you'll find a lot of new construction opportunities. If you are looking to buy land, like, there could be an option to find stuff out here. Lakeland is starting to get better than what it used to be by far. You know, when you drive out there, you're like, okay, I can definitely see myself living here. But at the same time, you know, if you are looking to stay closer to Orlando, you really got to start looking at all your options. Now, you know, there's a lot that goes into it, but, you know, overall, it comes down to your situation, what you need to do, and kind of figuring out what fits and what doesn't. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed kind of looking at the map, looking around Orlando. I hope this gave you some ideas of where you could go, where you could not go, you know, and like you know, we've had reach outs before where it's like, hey, and this is where I'm working. You know, where could I go? I'm like, well, you know, it really depends on your needs. And the first thing is always price point. So if you don't know what you could afford or what you want to afford, then reach out. Like, let us have that conversation. Like, even if you're not, heck, even if you're like, I don't even know if I want to move to Orlando. Good. I love having that conversation too, because I was there. I've been there. Our whole team has been there at some point. And it might not be for you, and that's okay. But if you know you want to move here and you're like, look, I want to either, one, you're like me and you're like, I hate people. I want to be as far away from people, but not too far. Or maybe you want to be out the boons. Hey, that works too. Like, you know, reach out. And like, a lot of times it's, you know, but no matter what, it's always going to come down to, like, once you start to get away from established neighborhoods, I always recommend, if you can get out here and just pick the worst time of day during rush hour and just go. See what it's like, see the worst traffic, because that's going to be your biggest deterrent, I think, in a lot of ways, is that traffic. Or if you want to be close to a hospital, you know, look up the public school information. How are the schools? Like all of that's going to play a part. Maybe if you want a pool, like I can afford like 400,000, but I want a pool. Well, okay, this area is probably not going to get you a pool, or most homes here don't have pools installed or whatever. Like all of that plays into it. So I hope you got value in this video. I hope it gave you some ideas of where to look for, where not to look for, where could I live, where could I not live. It's a big conversation. Like it's a bigger area than you think of, which is why I always tell everyone, like, it's not just about moving to Orlando. You're really looking at all of Central Florida because it's all expanding so fast and people move here. Like it's even rural areas, once rural, are now becoming populated areas. So hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it gave you great insight. Again, if you're looking to move out here, number popping up below is how you can get a hold of me. Call, text, email, doesn't matter. I look forward to talking with you, and I look forward to also seeing you in the next video.